So, hey there, what do you think was happening on the eastern side of Cuba on April 17, 1961? What was all those men and shooting in the background? That was a war. It was between the United States and Cuba, which was called the Bay Pigs Invasion. That person that you just saw in that previous picture was a well-known dictator in Cuba. His name is called Fidel Castro. Fidel Castro is a Cuban dictator who was born on August 13, 1926 on the eastern side of Cuba near Byron. He was married to Marita Diaz-Balart in 1948. He is the third of six children and has one child of his own. He started his education in America and there he got his passion for social justice. His dictatorship started with the Cold War and Bay Pigs invasion when Russia put nuclear weapons on their land. The thesis statement. The Bay Pigs invasion affected many aspects of American life, including the economy, travel, art, and culture. Fidel Castro came into power in February 1959 after a three-year revolution aimed at overthrowing the regime of Fulgencio Batista, who was the previous dictator before him. Ever since then, Fidel Castro became the next dictator of Cuba. Obviously, we know that's the map of Cuba, so now let's listen to some facts about it. Cuba is an island country in the Caribbean. Havana is the largest city in Cuba and the country's capital. Santiago de Cuba is the second largest city. To the north of Cuba lies the United States, 140 kilometers or 90 miles away, which is Florida. Cuba is home to over 11 million people and is the most populous island nation in the Caribbean. The three arguments: economy, traveling, art, and culture. Economy, the embargo. After years in research, the American Association for World Health has strong-minded that the U.S. embargo of Cuba has dramatically harmed the health and nutrition of large numbers of ordinary Cuban citizens. By report, the medical opinion was confirmed that the U.S. embargo has caused a significant rise in suffering and even deaths in Cuba. For several years, the U.S. embargo has forced major financial load on the Cuban healthcare system. To the fact that in 1992, the U.S. trade embargo, which is one of the best embargoes of its kind, sharply restricting that the sale of medicines and medical equipment was tightened by the 1992 Cuban Democracy Act. This is a chart of Cuba, how it changed over time. And right now, the economy has increased a whole lot. It is 28.3%, and world average is 59.5%, and regional average is 60%, and free economies is 84.7%. When the Bay Pigs invasion was happening, Cuba had to try to store up some missiles from Russia and nuclear weapons from the USSR for possible attacks on the United States, which almost caused World War III, but they got caught red-handed. The United States got the right to a small corner of Cuba to keep track of what's going on to avoid further threats to the U.S. Although the U.S. doesn't allow its citizens to travel to Cuba, Americans can still visit Cuba by flying in from another country, which the Cuban government does not mind. Art/culture, Little Havana, and Cuban cigars. Little Havana is an area of Miami, Florida. It is known for many Cuban immigrant residents as well as many residents from Central and South America. It is named after Havana, the capital of the largest city in Cuba. Little Havana is well known as the center of social, cultural, and political activity in Miami. Its festivals such as Cale Ocho Festival, the Three Kings Parade, and others have been on TV to millions of people every year in many different continents. It is also known for its landmarks including Cale Ocho and its Walk of Fame for famous artists. Cale Ocho is always celebrated on March 14th every year, and Cale Ocho stands for the 8th Street. One artist that performed in Little Havana was Celia Cruz. Celia Cruz was a Cuban icon. She was born October 21st, 1925, died July 16, 2003. Another artist, still to this day, performs in Little Havana is Willie Cranos. Willie Cranos was born April 5th, 1947, in Cuba. Well, now he's 65 years old. Last but not least, Gloria Estefan. Gloria Estefan was born September 1st, 1957, in Havana, Cuba. She is now 55. She also performed in Little Havana as well. Since now you know a little bit about Little Havana, let's go back and see how it started. The history of Little Havana. The name Little Havana started in the 1960s as the concentration of the Cubans in the area grew a lot. Little Havana is the name attached to the spreading neighborhood lying directly west of downtown Miami. It stretches west from the Miami River for several miles. This name was applied to the Shenandoah and the Riverside neighborhoods in the 1960s, following the beginnings of the huge arrival of Cuban immigrants there. Little Havana is famous as the cultural and political capital of Cuban Americans, and the community is the center of the Cuban exile communities. And this picture is a little taste to how Little Savannah looks like. Now, let's talk about Cuban cigars. Cuban cigars are illegal in the United States except for pre-embargo cigars, which are very rare and extremely expensive. If U.S. citizens try to buy, own, or bring any Cuban cigars into the United States, they may be questioned to fines and other penalties depending on the particular reasoning. Cuban cigars became illegal to be disrupted or used in America in 1962, Benedict's invasion, when JFK put a trade embargo against Cuba. This embargo was placed in order to take power away from Fidel Castro's communist government. The Benedict's invasion was one of the most important political decisions in the history of the United States. Its effects are still being felt today, especially in the Cuban communities of the United States. The decisions that were made by major offices of our government showed evidence that the United States was and is far from perfect. They plotted a plan that wasn't completely thought through and paid a major price for global embarrassment. They took the chance to destroy the communist threat that was quite close to our coast and in the process made the CIA and our government look useless. And she scrambled out the sleeping bag and breathed deeply. Whew! That was a long book. But there, that's what happened on April 17, 1950. Well, I'll catch you later.